everyone to the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts virtually for our opening lecture for the Sunken Cities exhibition. We are delighted that you are here this evening. My name is Izzy Fuqua. I'm the Adult Programs Coordinator for the museum, and I'm delighted to be here tonight with Peter Schertz, our Curator of Ancient Art, and Franck Gaudio, our speaker who will open up the exhibition for us. I am going to turn it over to Dr. Peter Schertz.
First of all, I'd like to welcome all of you here on behalf of the VMFA and its director, Alex Narge, and its entire staff of really dedicated people. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person with you all at the museum. I'm sorry you can't be there with me in the museum's theater, but we want to make sure that everybody feels safe when they come back to the museum. The museum did open last week. We had Members' Days, as many of you know, last Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. They were a great success. And you really should come and see the spectacular exhibition whenever you feel safe enough to come to the museum. We've put a lot of protocols in place to help you feel safe, but we all have to be careful. So thank you for joining us tonight on this webinar, or web broadcast lecture. We are going to be hearing from Franck Gaudio, the founder and president of the European Institute of Underwater Archaeology, known by its initials in French, ESAM. Treasures of Ancient Egypt, Sunken Cities is organized by ESAM with the generous support of the Hilti Foundation and in collaboration with the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities of the Arab Republic of Egypt. We are very grateful for their support and for their help in bringing these amazing objects to Richmond. Franck Gaudio's most ambitious projects are conducted off the coast of Egypt, in Alexandria's eastern harbor and in the Bay of Abu Qir. In partnership with the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, a vast area under the sea has been mapped and investigated beginning in 1992. In the year 2000, the ancient city of Thonis Heraklion and parts of the equally ancient city of Canopus were discovered in the Bay of Abu Qir. The objects featured in this exhibition, now on view at the VMFA, come from this project, and the work is ongoing. Franck's talk this evening is entitled Sunken Treasures from Ancient Egypt. It will highlight thrilling discoveries at the heart of the exhibition. Please join me in welcoming Franck Gaudio.
I would like to welcome everybody. Thank you for attending this lecture, which we give you the background of the present exhibition in the Virginia Museum of Fine Art, Treasure of Ancient Egypt, Sunken Cities. We knew from ancient texts that existed once upon a time three cities, Heraklion, Thonis, and Canopus. We know them because they are mentioned in several ancient texts. For example, Herodotus, the father of history, came to Egypt in 450 BC, and he landed in Egypt at a place where was a large temple to the god Heracles. And he says that that temple is a very, very old temple at that time already. Very strangely enough, he also mentioned that Thonis was the name of the guardian of this branch of the Nile. Something strange. And he even relates that Queen Helena and King Menelaus landed in Egypt at that very same place during the Trojan War. Thus, he is going back into the time very far away. 2 centuries after was made a stele, which has been discovered and is now in Cairo Museum. It is called the Stele of the Canopus Decree. And it's a trilingual stele, meaning that there is a text in hieroglyph, which is translated into Demotic and into Greek. The hieroglyphic text say that there was a very strange ceremony celebrated in a temple of Amun of the Gareb, linked to the ceremonial to the god Osiris. In the Greek text, the city which is mentioned as the city possessing the temple of Amun of the Gareb in hieroglyph is translated by the city of Herakleion. Thus, since the discovery of that stele in 1881, it was known that whoever we find the temple of Amun, of the Gareb in that region, would have found the city of Herakleion. The god Amun was the supreme god for the Egyptians of that time, and Amun of the Gareb was the god, the supreme god, giving to the new pharaoh the titles of their power as universal king. In the 2nd century BC, a Greek author called Nicander is mentioning also another city, the city of Canopus, which was in the same region. And he even relates that Canopus took his name from the name of the pilot of King Menelaus, who died on the sand of Tonis. Sands of Tonis, the name of the Guardian Tonis, it doesn't make a city, but it's very strange. In the 1st century BC, Diodorus Siculus ascertained that there was a city there, and the name of that city was Tonis, and it was the former emporium of the Egyptian, meaning the great port of Egypt on the Mediterranean Sea. Why the former? Because at the time of Diodorus Siculus, the emporium of the Egyptian was, of course, Alexandria. Thus, Diodorus Siculus mentioned that Tonis was a big port once upon a time. At the end of the 1st century BC, the Greek geographer Strabo came to Egypt, lived in the city of Alexandria for 3 years, visited the city of Canopus, and he is mentioning the city of Herakleion. He doesn't go to Herakleion, but he mentioned close to Canopus, 3.5 miles away, was a city called Herakleion. And he ends his description by saying that he was told that in ancient time, a city named Tonis was existing nearby. Thus, at the time of Strabo, 25 BC, the city of Tonis had already disappeared and was merely a kind of a myth. The question was, where was Herakleion? Where was Canopus? And was Tonis really existing? Was Tonis close to Herakleion? Those 3 cities has been looked for since the 19th century, and they had never been discovered on land. We have also a representation on a mosaic, which can be found in Italy, in the city of Palestrina, and which is believed to represent the city of Herakleion and the city of Canopus in the delta of the Nile. Thus, we do not know much about those 3 cities. I thought it will be a superb challenge to try to find those cities and know more about them. Thus, we started with my team a mission west of the delta of the Nile, here in the Bay of Aboukir. We used very sophisticated geophysics equipment. One of them has been even developed for that purpose by the French Commissary of Atomic Energy. And during months and months, we scan the west part of the Bay of Aboukir, making lines separated 10 meters from 10 meters, doing thousands of kilometers of line. And after several years, we could demonstrate that a large portion of land, the surface of it is 110 square kilometers, sunk below the water of the Mediterranean Sea. And on that portion of land, 110 square kilometers, we detected two very big areas where most probably there was some archaeological vestiges. One 7.5 kilometers from the present coast of Egypt, and one 1.2 kilometers from the present coast of Egypt. Of course, it's a teamwork. Here, it's part of the team. It's a very international team. There is French, Egyptian, Americans, British, German, Spanish, Italian, Russian, Cuban, Filipino, and most probably I forget some of them. The team is composed of underwater archaeologists, geophysics engineers, specialists in underwater photographing, specialists of underwater filming, restorer of artifacts, and so on. And the work of that team has been totally founded since 26 years by the ILTI Foundation. Here is our boat. After having detected some area where most probably there was something under the sediment, we dove and we saw nothing, flat sand. Of course, we were extremely disappointed and we started doing archaeological excavation, evacuating meter of sand, 1 meter of sand, nothing, 1.5 meter, nothing, and 2 meters of sand. We started to discover massive walls, most probably belonging to a temple. And the first monument we discovered was fantastic. It was the naos of the temple. A naos, it's a monolith chapel made in one stone, which was containing the main statue of the god. It was the saint of the Egyptian temple. But we were extremely lucky because on that naos, there is on his face hieroglyphic inscription. And it is written, I am the house of the supreme god, Amun of the grave. Thus we knew that we had discovered the temple of Amun of the grave, and thanks to the stela of the Canopus decree, which is now in Cairo Museum, we knew that we were in the city of Heraklion, 100% sure. 1 week later, under one of the walls of the temple, we discover this magnificent artifact, an intact stele, beautiful, dating back from 380 BC. And on that stele, it is written here that Pharaoh ordered that decree be erected in the city of Tunis. We knew we were in Heraklion, and that stele was telling us, you are in Tunis. We were looking for two cities, Heraklion and Tunis. It was one and the same city. We have we had to stop looking for Tonis. We were also in Tonis. Herakeion was the Greek name for the very old Egyptian city of Tonis. We are now performing underwater excavation since the discovery of Herakeion Tonis in 2000. And of course, we are discovering fabulous artifacts, architectural elements, statuary, statuette, shipwrecks, and remains of a huge monument. When you see those pictures, you could think, oh, they are very lucky, the visibility is superb. Unfortunately, is not the case. The visibility there in the Bay of Aboukir is maximum 1 meter at the best. But from time to time, we are extremely lucky and the visibility could be 2 to 3 meters. At that time, we are taking the underwater photograph. But this visual that you see above, which is 50 meters long, cannot be taken with only one photograph. It's the assembly of thousands of photographs that are matched one to the other by a program of virtual reconnaissance, and which give us a 3D rendering of the excavations that we are doing under the water of the Bay of Aboukir. You see there the remains of the temple of Amon-Gereb, who partially capsized into a channel, which is now, of course, underwater and totally buried under the sediment of the Nile. We have now a very clear idea of the layout of the city of Tonis Herakeion, with the main island with the temple of Amon-Gereb, several islands with secondary sanctuaries. It was a kind of a Venice city with port and channels. In the ports and the channels, we have discovered up to date more than 700 ancient anchors and 75 ancient shipwrecks. It's a huge discovery. Shipwrecks everywhere. You have here a very important Egyptian shipwreck which has been described by Herodotus, the Bari. But we are also discovering fabulous artifacts like this Colossus statue of the god Hapi, god of the flood of the Nile, bringing abundance and fertility to the kingdom of Egypt. It's the largest statue of God ever discovered in Egypt. Of course, when you discover such artifact, you need to adjust the logistic, which was not scheduled at the beginning, but the result is sometimes very rewarding. Here is a statue of the god Hapi, bringing on an offering table the gift to the kingdom of Egypt. And you can see the size of the artifact compared to my size here. We are finding also on the monument, in the temple and other sanctuary, all of the ritual equipment that were used in that place. Those temples has disappeared suddenly and were swallowed by the sea. Thus, we are finding everything. On land, you never find such artifacts in a temple. They have been looted for centuries. We are finding jewelry, coins of any kind by thousands, beautiful statuettes like that ivory statuette that we have just discovered a few months ago. But let us come back to the stele of the decree of Canopus. That stele mentioned that in the temple of Amon-Gereb was celebrated a ceremony to the god of the underworld, Osiris. And that At the end of that ceremony, which lasted, by the way, 21 days, the god was brought into by a nautical procession towards the city of Canopus in order for him to reach his sanctuary in the city of Canopus. Thus, we were more or less sure that during the excavation of the temple of Amon-Gereb and the surrounding area, we will discover elements which are linked to that ceremonial of the mysteries of Osiris. What is this ceremonial? What is this ceremony of the mysteries of Osiris? The ceremony of the mystery of Osiris is the most secret ritual that ever existed. It has been kept secret for thousands of years. It refers back to one of the foundation legends of Egypt. At the beginning of the time was in Egypt a king whose name was Osiris. He was the king of the good of civilization. He taught the mankind how to cultivate the land. He brought the law. He taught them how to praise their gods. That king had a brother, Set. But Osiris was the heir, as inherited the fertile land of Egypt, and Set, his brother, has inherited the desert land of Egypt. And Set was extremely jealous of his brother Osiris. Thus, he committed the ultimate crime. He killed his brother, dismembered him in 14 pieces, and scattered those pieces all over Egypt. But Osiris had a wife, Isis. Isis was a great magician with powerful magic power. She was able to retrieve the 14 pieces of her husband, to put them back together in order to reconstitute the body of her husband by doing the first of the mummy. And thanks to her magical power, she could revive Osiris, and she conceived a son with him, Horus. When Horus was born, Osiris went into the underworld and became the master of the underworld. Of course, the uncle of Horus, Set, wanted to kill the heir of Osiris. He tried to find it in order to kill him, but Horus was protected by Isis and many other gods and goddesses, and he could escape and grow up. And when he was strong enough, he was able to confront Set and the devilish forces, and defeated Set and the devilish forces. It is all about the victory of love against the death. It is all about the victory of the good forces against the devilish forces, which are defeated, but always there, ready to bring the chaos into the kingdom of Egypt. Thus, Pharaoh, every year, had to commemorate this foundation legend of Egypt to revive the legend, the murder of Osiris, the rebirth of Osiris, the birth of Horus, and also take over Egypt. Thus, it was to commemorate, to revive the legend, and to perpetuate the legend. That legend was not known by the Egyptian. It was only known by Pharaoh and the priest of Osiris. It was a very secret legend. You will tell me, but how can you know that legend? And how do you know that, how was done that ceremony to commemorate, to revive, and to perpetuate that legend? And what was exactly, what was done in that temple in order to revive that legend? We know it because in some of the temples of Egypt, which are very well preserved, there is some chapels which were devoted for this ritual of the mysteries of Osiris. And on the wall of those chapels are inscribed the text, which say what the priest and what Pharaoh could do during that ceremony in order to revive, to give birth back to the god Osiris. But you tell me if it is inscribed in the temple, everybody could read it and see it. No, because the public was not allowed into the Egyptian temple, only the priest and the assistant. And inside the saint of the temple, in the chapel of Osiris, only Pharaoh and the priest of Osiris could enter and see and read what was written on the wall. Now, if you visit Egypt, you can pay for a few dollars a ticket to enter a temple, and you will enter the Osiris chapel, and you will be able, of course, to read what is written on the wall, because the hieroglyph has been deciphered since the 19th century. But you will have hard time, because those texts are extremely strange and very complex. To give you an idea, one of those texts starts by the sentence: to know the secrets of the great work which is done thanks to secret ritual that will not be revealed in a secret place that will not be mentioned. And you have, after, very strange texts, from which we understand that in the saint of the temple, Pharaoh himself was doing 2 statuettes with different material. And thanks to magic formula and prayers, he was enabling Osiris, the god Osiris, to come and incorporate himself into those statuettes. When the great work was achieved after 21 days of ritual and prayers and fumigation with incense, etc., and animal sacrifice, the 2 statuettes were brought into a secret place in the temple, which had never been discovered, though we know such a place exists. And they were put into a kind of a tomb where was already the 2 statuettes of the year before. The 2 statuettes of the year before were taken out, replaced with the new statuette of the new god Osiris, and the two old statuettes were buried in a secret place, which is Osiris' tomb. Very strange, very complicated. We know from the stele of the decree of Canopus that in Tonis Heracleon, the two statuettes were brought by a nautical procession from the temple of Tonis Heracleon towards the city of Canopus in the sanctuary of Osiris in Canopus. Those texts has been translated by very knowledgeable Egyptologists. One of them, Chassina, say they are extremely difficult to understand, but from what I can read, I can say that some instruments which look like that were used during the ritual of the mysteries of Osiris, and he made a beautiful plate of the instrument which most probably were used. On the left, you have the genuine ritual instrument that we found in Tonis Heracleon. He was right. Everywhere you have the presence of Osiris underwater. Here, a beautiful bronze statuette of Osiris with golden eyes. Here, the likeness of a priest of Osiris. They were kept to the most absolute secret. They could not even say that they were the priest of the Osiris. They were saying, I am the priest of the god whose name I cannot pronounce. Beautiful ritual instrument. When you will visit the exhibition, you will be able to see artifacts that only Pharaoh could see and touch. And underwater, we found this basin. I was very surprised by finding such a monument close to the Naos of Amon-Guerre. At that time, on board was Professor Jean Yoyot, who was the most knowledgeable Egyptologist maybe since Champollion. And when I came back on board, I say, Professor, it's very strange. I found a sarcophagus, red granite sarcophagus nearby the Naos of Amon. And he told me, no, you haven't found a sarcophagus. You have found the garden tank in which Pharaoh was fabricating the statuette for the mysteries of Osiris. And he was right. Pharaoh, or the priest of Osiris, was making two statuettes. One of them was made of seed from the Nile with barley seed, which were germinating. It was wrapped like a mummy and then put into a sarcophagus. And this is one of the mummy magical statuette, which was made during the ceremonial of the mysteries of Osiris, and in which the god Osiris was reincorporating himself. Close to the temple, we found in the sacred channel the barge, the ceremonial barge in which the god was translated from Tonis Heracleon to Canopus. One of the barge, of course. Most probably there is many other. This boat was made of sycamore wood, which is a wood of the tree of life for the Egyptian. And of course, it has been touched by the god Osiris himself. Thus, when it had been worn out, it could have not been destroyed. The only thing they could do is to sink it on purpose in the sacred channel north to the temple, because the sacred channel, the waters of the sacred channel was the fluid of the god Osiris, according to the Egyptian. Thus, it was given back inside Osiris himself, and it was surrounded with present of ritual instrument, which has been used during the ritual of the mysteries of Osiris. That barge, processional barge, was going from the temple of Amun-Gereb to the temple of Osiris in Canopus. We had found the temple of Amun-Gereb and the city of Heraklion, but we found also Canopus. And in Canopus, we found the sanctuary to Osiris under 2.5 meters of sediment. Thus, we have the beginning of the ceremony and the end of the ceremony. In that temple, we found exquisite statues, statue personification of the Nile, portraits of Pharaoh, because that temple was a temple beloved by the Pharaoh, according to the texts. We found also the statue of the main god. But you will tell me that statue doesn't look like Osiris. It looks like a Greek statue of a bearded man. It's not Osiris. Yes, it's Osiris. Because at the end of the 4th century, Alexander the Great came to Egypt and became Pharaoh of Egypt. After his death, one of his generals, Ptolemy Soter, became Pharaoh of Egypt. And one day, the new Pharaoh, which was Greek, had a dream. And in this dream, he saw a new god appearing to him, which was a combination of Egyptian and Greek gods. The main Egyptian god was Osiris. And there was the god Hades from the Greek. And the new god had the power of the god Osiris and the same function than the god Osiris. And according to the legend, the pharaoh commissioned the best artist of his time, Bryaxis, to make a likeness of the god which has appeared to him in his dream. And Bryaxis came with this likeness of the new god, Apis Osiris Serapis. His name is Serapis, but he is an Osiris. And it was the main statue of the temple of Canopus. We found also a fabulous statue of Queen Arsinoe II, who was known for her beauty and was the wife of Pharaoh Ptolemy II. And she is represented here as the goddess of love, Hathor for the Egyptian, Aphrodite for the Greek, Venus for the Roman, dressed in a transparent and wet tunic coming out of the water. Is one of the most fabulous fabulous statue ever done by an artist. We found also the famed canopic vase, which was mentioned in many texts because in Canopus, Osiris was also worshipped under the form of a vase from which he was emerging himself. I tried underwater to carry the canopic vase, the Osiris Canopus, with one hand, but it was too heavy for me. We also found the naos of the temple. This naos is called the naos of the decade. Why? Because on all its surface are engraved the Egyptian calendar. And on that face here, If you look from the left, you will see in the exhibition a text, and this text is unique in Egypt. It had never been read before. It's the text of the creation of the world, the text of the Genesis according to the Egyptian. This monument dates back from 380 BC, and with the calendar of the Egyptian engraved on all the face are astrological predictions which make of that monument the first astrological calendar in the world. In front of that naos was thrown at the end of the ceremonial of the mystery of Osiris, the statuette made by Pharaoh of Osiris in order for the god to enter into the underworld. At that same time, towards the east, where the sun rises, Osiris resurrected in order to protect the city of Heraklion and the whole kingdom of Egypt for another year. Those city has been stricken by earthquake, which trigger huge landslide, tidal wave, and land liquefaction. And they were totally buried under the sediment, under 10 meters of water. And they are a kind of underwater Pompeii, I would say. From time to time, when I really have to have some clue what to do and where to look for, I go and I ask to the Sphinx some question. And sometimes I get very good answer. I hope I could also answer your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. That was wonderful. And we do have quite a few questions that have come in throughout the talk. So if you are ready, the first question we have gotten a couple of different times is, do we know what caused the sinking of the cities? What happened?
Yes, we know what has happened and when. In Tunis Heraklion, in the mid-2nd century BC, happened a very strong earthquake, which triggered a tidal wave. And the weight of the water, in addition to the weight of the huge monument of this temple, caused the phenomena of land liquefaction, and everything capsized 8 meters down into a fraction of a second. And as we are in the delta of the Nile, the water is very close from the level of the land. The sea came and covered this area for centuries, and then the silt and the sediment of the Nile has sealed everything until the time we discovered them and we excavated them.
Oh, okay. So just to follow up, did this happen very quickly, or was it a gradual decline or slide into the ocean?
No, there were several phenomena. Of course, there is a progressive rising of the sea level since the antiquity, more or less 10 centimeters every century. Now it's much more now. But at that time, it was 10 centimeters every century. There is also a subsidence of the land, progressive 10 centimeters every century, which make altogether 20 centimeter difference every century. In 2000 years, it's 4 meters. But this was compensated by the sediment brought by the flood of the Nile every year.
Mm.
So they had a kind of balance there. But when the earthquake triggers the land liquefaction, everything went down in a fraction of a second.
Wow, that's remarkable. And it reminds me of what you said about Pompeii having a very similar instantaneous, monumental effect.
Yes, you are absolutely right, Easy. It's exactly like Pompeii. It has disappeared in a fraction of a second, and it was totally sealed by the sediment. This is why we are finding artifacts that you never find on land because they have been looted for centuries.
Mm-hmm. They've been protected in a sense.
They have been protected
underwater.
Fortunately for us, unfortunately for the inhabitant of that time. You have to understand that the city of Tonis Herakleion is twice the size of the city of Pompeii. It was a very big city. When you have a temple 50 meters long of Pompeii, the temple of Amon-Gereb is 175 meters long. You know, it was massive.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you gave us such great background on the event and how monumental it was. Do you know if there were any ancient texts that referred to this event happening so that you knew to look for these cities?
This is very strange. We have no document talking about this catastrophic event, but we had document talking about those cities and the ritual in those cities and what has happened during the ceremonies in those cities. And we have also distances in between the cities. This is why I was convinced that I had to go and look in the water, not on land, because it didn't match on land. And it could be only under the water when you were looking at the direction from one city to another.
So you found a mystery and you knew that a chapter was missing.
There was 3 cities missing, and I saw it was a worthy challenge to find them back and bring them back to light.
That's right. So Franck, do you know if anyone else attempted to find these cities prior to your discovery of them, your team's discovery?
Oh yes, of course. Many archaeologists since the 19th century were looking for those cities. And sometimes they were discovering on land some ruins and they were saying, oh, this is Tonis, this is Herakleion, etc. But here we are extremely lucky. On all monuments that we are discovering in those cities, we are finding inscribed artifact, which say you are here in the temple of Amon-Gereb, you are here in the temple of Heracles, and it's absolutely fabulous.
Yeah. So could you tell us how deep were these artifacts below water? What is the distance from the top to the bottom to get to some of these works?
Well, we have more or less 8 to 10 meters of water, and the artifacts are under 60 centimeters to 5 meters of sediment, depending on the area. You can have up to 5 meters of sediment there. And you have to dig, and they are not soft sediment, it's clay. You have to cut it piece by piece in order to go and excavate it.
And so you're cutting underwater through clay to free the objects and then have them be lifted up?
Absolutely. We are doing excavation underwater like you are doing on land, layers by layers, you know. Of course, when you see a picture like that, you never find an object like that. That Sphinx was under more than 1.2 meters of hard sediment. And of course, you take the picture when it's clear from the sediment.
So a couple of people have asked that since the event was so quick and happened so fast, were there any human remains discovered? I think the idea of Pompeii has people thinking about how, you know, some of these individuals who lived there were entombed there. So I wasn't sure if you had any experience with that in your excavations.
Yeah, in the main temple of Amon-Gereb, we found human remains and a huge block of construction of the temple. People have been trapped under those blocks, yes.
Okay. So a more specific question to your work as an archaeologist, someone asked if you use something called LIDAR, light detection and ranging. From my very brief search, I understand that it's a sensing method using lasers to understand the different depths. Do you use any sort of technology when you're searching for things?
We are using a specific technology. We are using a nuclear resonance magnetometer, which has been developed by the Commissary of Atomic Energy. And nowadays we are using a new prototype, which is a kind of a scanner, but scanner don't work underwater, but it's a kind of sediment profiler, sediment penetrator, which give you a 3D image of what could be under the sediment. But the prototypes that we are developing nowadays, and it gave us quite a good result, but it's, I would say, top of the technology, and we are still developing it.
Okay, great.
To measure some distance, etc., you can use laser, but you don't find anything with laser. It's only for photograph and target for photograph and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, very often systematically doing stereophotogrammetry. That means 3D rendering of all the excavation site every day. Like that, you can have a 3D model of the excavation going on, you know, and before diving, the archaeologists, we come to the computer, turn the site, and we say, oh, look, here there is a Sphinx, and just behind it, you will see a ceramic here. You have to bring that ceramic, etc., etc.
We did have two specific questions about objects that you mentioned. The first is regarding the barge, the boat. So my understanding is an object that isn't made of stone can deteriorate very quickly. What was it like to bring that object to the surface?
Well, the barge is made of wood, sycamore wood, by the way, because sycamore was a tree of life for the Egyptians. It was a sacred barge. And the wood is very well preserved once it is covered with the sediment. When it protrudes out of the sediment, it will be totally destroyed. But once it has been sealed by the sediment, it can stay for thousands of years untouched. The stone are quite well preserved, especially hard stone. The limestone, which is softer, has been attacked by worms, mussels, when they were inside the water, and they have been only preserved when they have been covered with the sediment. For the metals, the bronze resists quite well. The gold is absolutely new. When you find a gold jewelry, you just have to rinse it and that's it. But of course, all the other artifacts made of silver, bronze, lead or stone have to be treated, soaked into fresh water and then stabilized. And for very big piece like the statue of the god Happy, which is in the exhibition, it took 1.5 years to take all the salt from that statue with a bath of fresh water, and then another year to restore it. Thus, all the objects that we are finding are preserved and restored by us, and then ends into the Egyptian museums.
Okay. We just have time for one or two more questions. So if we don't get to everyone's, I'll make sure to keep track of those questions and connect with people offline. But people are asking Frank, how much work is left to go? Peter shared that your work is ongoing. So are you still working at this site, discovering new artifacts?
Yes. Every year we are doing 1 or 2 missions on site. The mission of this year has been postponed because of the pandemic, and I hope I will be able to launch it by October. Every year, when we are going there, we say, oh, we have found most probably the best pieces. And every year we are finding even better and more interesting artifacts. But from what I know now, I would assume that we haven't found more than 5% of what is on those cities. 95% is still to be discovered because the area is vast, but also you have artifacts on several layers, according to the period, and it will take hundreds of years to excavate those cities. The city of Pompeii is under excavation, scientific excavation since the 18th century, 19th century. And a big part of it has to be excavated. That city of Tonis Herakleion is underwater. It's twice the size of the city of Pompeii. It's much older than the city of Pompeii and has a much longer history than the city of Pompeii. Thus, century ahead of us, yes. I would guess that I need 3 centuries to finish the work.
Wow. Well, so one final question. People are wondering, and the exhibition just opened at VMFA, so many people may not have gotten to see it yet, but we are all anxious to do so. Can you share what's going to happen to these works after the VMFA closes, these artifacts? Where do they go next?
They will return back to Egypt. Part of them will go to the new Grand Museum in Cairo, which will open next year. Part of them will go to the renovated Greco-Roman Museum in Alexandria. Part will go to the Museum of the Greek Library of Alexandria. And another part will go to the National Museum of Alexandria and to the Maritime Museum of Alexandria. But I hope a new exhibition could be created with other artifacts in order to show the result of our work and the history of those fabulous cities.
Yes, yes. Well, Frank, this has been a delight. It is 6 o'clock our time, much later your time. Thank you again for staying up late and giving us this wonderful peek into this new exhibition we have on view at VMFA. For those of you who haven't gotten to see the exhibition yet, please go to the VMFA website to reserve your timed entry ticket to see it. For those of you who are members of the museum, Frank will join us again next week, exactly the same time, 5 o'clock, Thursday, July 16th, to provide a deeper dive into some of his favorite objects that are on view at VMFA. So if you're a member and haven't made your reservation yet, please go to the website to do so. Frank, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. This was wonderful.
Thank you to you and to all the attendants, and go and see that exhibition. I think it's worth.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Frank, and hopefully we'll see you at some point in Virginia.
See you soon.
Bye.